Welcome to a special meeting of the City of Post Falls Planning and Zoning Commission. Will you please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the last day of January. And thank you for joining us on our special meeting. We'll go ahead and start with a roll call, please.
Hamby,
Here.
Davis,
Here.
Kimball,
Here.
Carey.
Here.
All right, ceremonies, announcements, appointments, or presentations. Anything this evening?
There's none.
All right, seeing none, then we will move to any amendments to the agenda.
There's none as well.
Well, then I'll ask the question, is there a declaration of conflict, ex parte contact, or site visit? Anything to declare, commissioners?
No.
None. Okay, then that would bring us to the consent calendar. John?
Yeah, we have action item A, the meeting minutes from the January 10th, 2023 meeting.
Okay, any questions?
No.
If everybody had a chance to look, I'd look for a motion.
I move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
I second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Call for a vote.
Carey,
Yes.
Kimball,
Yes.
Davis.
Yes.
Hamby.
Yes.
All right. Citizen issues. I'm going to abbreviate this, but this section of the agenda is reserved for citizens wishing to address the commission on an issue that is not on this evening's agenda. Is there anyone here for citizen issues? Seeing none, then I believe we have no unfinished or old business.
True.
Then that would bring us to our public hearing, and we are looking to review and forward a recommendation for development impact fee update. Mr. Manley?
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. John Manley, Planning Manager, introducing the development impact fee update. Most of this you're going to see before. It's kind of a rehash of the time before I went before you guys. But the Planning and Zoning Commission, you serve as the Impact Fee Advisory Committee currently. The current impact fees adjustments, they are based on an inflationary cost method rather than a typical ENR index that we've done in the past. Additionally, there is no update to the capital improvement plan. So the capital plan basis is the same as it was previously. It's just the cost escalation based off the inflation. How we got here, you can see the process that we went through starting in August. December 13th, that's where you saw this before, and that's where you requested continuation for this. This evening we do have the police department here to discuss options with the public safety. We also have the Parks Department to talk about their fees accordingly, as well as the engineering division. We do have a city council workshop for the future. With the exact date, we don't know. It does say February 7th, we'll see. What you see here is in the green, that's the proposed updated fees with the current fee you see there in the gray, and that kind of compares the difference in the total fee between here the multifamily, the increase, the single family increase, and then for each commercial category you see the increases from the right to the left. Reason for these increases, a lot of it has to deal with the background growth for the master planning. You see here, right, the growth continually going up. You see here that we've had an average annual growth rate of 4.7. That's that red line. We do have periods where you see we have increased growth or less growth, and then we have increased growth. But we base everything more on that average annual growth rate to kind of get a constant through the planning. Impact fees are payments required by the local governments on new development. It's not to be used for maintenance, staffing of vehicles, and those kind of things. It's a ways to for growth, paying for growth. And so it's new growth paying for their impact on those capital plans. The impact fee categories, you see here, we got the parks, the police, the transportation, and we have the multimodal. This was a recent new add to our impact fee. So here's public safety. I can have the chief come up and discuss this aspect of the impact fees. Any questions at this point?
Questions for John?
No.
Nope. Okay.
Commissioners, Greg McLean, Chief of Police. Thanks for allowing me to come up here and discuss these impact fees and the increases that we're looking for. Basically, we haven't changed our impact fee guides that we had since 2018, so we're still looking at police department support facilities and also the communication facilities, which are our tower sites that allows us to communicate with all the police officers and cars and different agencies. In 2021, the city did a facility assessment on all of the buildings within the city and needs of what we're going to be looking at needing in the future and what we need to plan for in the future. And one of those facilities, being the police department, was in a major need of an expansion because of the increased growth that we've seen, increased cost of. Oh yeah, clicker. Yeah, I haven't signed change yet. The increased calls for service, we've seen a 26.6% increase in call for service since 2018, which means that we have to put more officers on the street to cover those calls. And we basically we have run out of space in our current PD, administrative section, personnel support space, warehouse space. We're in need of addition for evidence storage. We've outdone our current evidence facility to be able to hold what we have in evidence. Modification of the fleet shop, because with more officers means more cars, which means we have to support those vehicles and keep them up and running. And also land purchase. I am currently in negotiation with a property owner to the east of the police department trying to acquire that property, because we would need to acquire that property to expand our current police department to meet the codes of the city. So we're in negotiation to purchase that land price. And land price, because of commercial property, we're looking at anywhere from the area of $11 a square foot to $14 to $15 a square foot to purchase that property. In 2003 is when we first purchased the police department, and that was a 24,000 square foot, a little over 24,000 square foot facility. We were able to purchase that, build the facility, including the shop, for $3.4 million. That's roughly about $1.39 a square foot. The facility assessment came back saying that for us to be adequate for the next 7 to 10 years in what is expected to be growth within the city, we're looking at having to build a 16,000 square foot extension on the current police department, as well as outbuildings to support the evidence that we're going to need. To do that is going to cost about $12.6 million, which is roughly, again, $840 a square foot. So quite a bit of difference from when we first built that facility a long time ago. Did I go too far here? What did I do? So currently, right now, annually, we are collecting about $450,000 in impact fees to support our infrastructure for expansion and looking at expansion that we need. This includes the towers, other facilities within our compound. If we calculate out that estimate of $450,000, that's going to take me about 26 years to pay off the $12.6 million that we need to build that current building right now. The impact fee increase, if it goes forward, would allow us to obviously pay that off much faster. With the $450,000, that wouldn't even allow me to make a loan payment on the $12.6 million. So without some sort of increase, we're gonna have to come up with some alternative on how we're gonna make that expansion with the current police department. There was some talk, I wasn't here, but I have actually watched the last impact fee area, and there was a big concern with the high cost and why people would want to build in Post Falls. Post Falls is the 6th largest growing city in Idaho. And we, as well as many of the other agencies here, provide services that a lot of the surrounding cities do not provide. We, as the police department, we respond to all medical calls. And we deal with the medical issues. We deploy Narcan for overdoses. We do unlocking of vehicles. We do VIN inspections. A lot of other agencies surrounding us do not do that. So for us to keep up that level of service, I need to have the officers on the streets doing what needs to happen. And when you say, why would people want to build here, I think it's the level of service is why people would want to build in Post Falls, even though it may be more expensive than to build in the county or in Coeur d'Alene. So with that, I'll have any questions I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions for Chief?
I do have one. And it kind of goes along with, so what John had said was that a lot of this has to do with inflation. And I think at our last meeting, it was mentioned that it's a huge increase. And which doesn't necessarily track with inflation. So with inflation from 2018 till now, it doesn't necessarily track with the inflation rates, even local construction costs going up. And I know that they're high.
Right.
And hopefully they'll be cooling off a little bit. Started to see that. But it was mentioned that there was a mistake in the previous impact fee calculation based on the facilities plan cost. Is that correct to your knowledge, or do you know anything about that?
I'm not aware of that particularly. The assessment facility, if you're asking about the $12.6 million to build the 16,000 square foot addition, then that was based off of their findings of what the actual cost for the supplies at that time, which was 2021, what that would cost to build that 16,000 square foot addition to the current police department. Now, I don't know if costs have come down at that time, but I'm not assuming that they have come down enough that I still can't cover it at $450,000 annually to cover those costs. And also on top of that, build another storage facility that would support our evidence that we're gonna need to build.
And, okay, were all of those facilities in the 2018 estimates?
Yes,
Okay, and so they were just basically grossly undercosted?
we couldn't afford to cover the cost and also purchase land that we needed on top of that.
Okay,
With the land that we're looking at right now, we're gonna be in excess of probably somewhere in the $1 million area just for what we need to build what we need to have for our current expansion.
okay. Okay. So it sounds like there was a mistake prior because inflation hasn't tracked with, I mean, even 17% last year of inflation construction inflation is not 70%, or I think even higher. I didn't look at what
But that wouldn't fall just on the police station expansion alone, right? You're talking about
I'm talking about across the board.
Across the board, yeah.
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 Right. And I mean, if there's cost or scope creep in any of this, it's fine. I just want to make sure that we're being upfront with that, with everyone, to make sure that we all know that there's an expansion that's just not inflation.
Right.
Any other questions for Chief? No?
All right,
Thank you, sir.
thank you. So we'll defer to Dave.
So where am I aiming with this one?
Should be on the right, should click this one,
There. Commissioners, Dave Fair, Parks and Recreation Director. Thank you also for allowing us a chance to clarify and hopefully answer some of the questions. I also went and reviewed your meeting where you discussed this, and I tried to cover my answers to those issues that were raised. This was already covered, that our fees support the level 1, level 2, and indoor recreation. We call it a replacement-based methodology. I think they have a different word for it now, but essentially we took a snapshot of what we were back in '97, and we've just maintained that with the level of growth. It doesn't mean it's, foot per person, but we kind of go up, and we've done a pretty good job of that. There was a question on the fees going up, and as staff, we share your concern. We look at it, and we struggle. We understand it's a no-win situation in that sense. Either way, it's not going to be perfect to try and find the best solution. But back in 2012, there was a reduction under the Park and Recreation side of it. And in that, all collection and development for level 2 was eliminated. And the thought back then by our administration was that we were getting stuff donated, we could go back and get it, and if it wasn't working, we'd come back and in a couple years and fix it. Well, it didn't happen in a couple years, and we weren't getting the donations. So we struggled with that. It was about 2017 that started addressing that to go into impact fees. With the 2020 plan, it brought back those fees and then addressed the construction costs. That study had some delays in it for various reasons. For the city, there was waiting for master plans, doing different things. At the time, the amount collected for property purchases was kept at that 2017 figure that we had. We went from 50,000 to 65,000 an acre. The reasoning for that is we had a level 1 parcel of land with the developer agreed on at the 65,000 an acre, so we felt pretty comfortable. We had looked at what we had purchased, and we had one at 76,000. Had another one that was 72,000, so we felt it was kind of in the ballpark. But as that delay happened, we realized that the costs of land were going up dramatically. And the reason I'm focusing on land is we're not looking at construction costs with this in our section of it, simply land purchases. Well, the cost of land was going up, and it was a discussion point with council. I don't know if it was a discussion point with you folks at the time, but council was concerned that we were not going to collect enough for the land. But it was agreed upon that we'd come back and look at it, and staff was directed to start kind of working on that. And of course, like everything, it takes time. Time flies by. So this update only addresses the land cost for park acquisition. How we came up with the current amounts for Tischler Bice, we did not go out and get an appraisal, but we went with 2 different realtors. One did a search for us, and one gave me access to the MLS. Went through and grabbed everything that was in the acreage, and we looked at 78 different properties. Then we had to go back in and look at, would this be appropriate for a level 1, level 2? Level 1 would be closer into town. There are some that we just discounted. They were commercial, and we'd contacted some of the brokers, and the costs were just extremely high and way out of our range. Some of the level twos that we discounted, they were for gated communities across the river. Almost everything in level two was across the river. Or you had to go into Washington to come back into Idaho. So those really aren't things that we could consider. We also looked at recent city purchases. And then all that was provided to Shore Bias. They did an average of cost, and that's where those numbers came from. I mentioned earlier about we had an agreement for $65,000 an acre with one developer. Well, we've had delays and stuff. We have an agreement now. We're looking at purchasing sometime in the next probably 3 months from them. That cost went from the $65,000 to $239,000. So that was $5.50 an acre.
And how long did that,
That was in about a
so?
4.5 year period.
It went up. Can
Yeah.
you repeat those numbers again? Just-
65,000
okay.
was what we had agreed in before 17,
Okay.
and right now we're at, and those prices have come down, by the way.
And-
They went from $6 a foot to $5 a foot. And I can tell you, it's kind of like when we purchased land for the landing. That was waterfront, and it was prime land, and that was 500,000 acre. We're not going to get a lot of those. So that's why I feel comfortable when they say, I think it's 170,000. Don't quote me on that, because I probably am way off. That's not the highest we've seen, that's not the lowest. Part of it is, the city has purchased land. We purchased some property off of Hargrave for about 70,000 an acre, us and Public Works. 5 of it will be a park, but there's not access to it right now. Ultimately, so we've got to put in a road, and eventually we'll get to it. So that's a long-term purchase. So you can find deals, but they come with issues.
How much land does the city currently own undeveloped? Do you know?
I guess if you could define, how much parkland do we have? Because we have undeveloped or passive parks. So like the community forest,
Okay.
there's almost 550 some acres.
But it's currently being used as a park?
Yes.
Okay, so what do you have that's not being used currently as a park?
We have the Cecil House that we purchased. That was 3.22 acres off of Cecil and Hargrave. We will be developing it, but we have higher priorities, and our costs have gone up.
Okay.
So we're trying to get Black Bay. We finally got all our permits from the feds, and now we have a grant with that. We had to reapply, so all of that's being reviewed and put back in. So it's taking longer, but it's much more expensive.
So only that 3 acres or 3.5
That's,
acres?
we have the sports complex, which is 25.5 acres at Tullamore. We hope to break ground on that in 3 years, when we have enough money to start the process. We've done a lot of work on it, because we had to put in the roads, or half our road on Cecil, and there was a water line that had to be put in. We've done all of the structural soils, so we're ready to go on that. So those are the 2 properties we have there. We do have some parcels that are due to us from developers, but you have to wait for their process and timing of getting that stuff in, and that's part of our calculations to maintain our level of service.
So if you bought the property, I guess that you're budgeting for it now, right? So if you buy it now, when would it be developed? What's purchased now, when would you have the money to actually develop that property?
We're between having the money and getting the designs, getting the permits, because we, just like everybody else, we have to do all the permitting.
Right.
We're looking at probably 5 to 6 years out.
Okay, so if you bought the property now, it'd be 5 to 6 years.
Now, but I'll say that Cecil House, we put it on hold because it's not the highest priority. The community came forward, we did a master plan for Black Bay Park, and it was probably a little bit bigger than what we've done. So we've been saving up money, we've been going for grants to do that.
Okay.
Also, the sports complex is a high priority. There's a lot of money that's gone into it already, but it's all underground. It's you know, and a surprise for us was having to put in, you know, a share of the road, but it's what we end up doing. What we have just finished was that agreement, or the development of the landing. That was a joint project with Avista. So we did some purchase, we did some trades and obligations, and we did some of our own construction. So that's how we're stretching a lot of these things. We go after grants, we work with partnerships, and we're working with one developer to get some softball fields in that are part of an agreement. So I think I
Okay.
kind of covered all that. That's some of the most recent purchases. Even the Prairie Trail was a purchase. That's being worked on right now, working with the developer. But we got a really good price on that because the state DOT took the brunt of it when they bought out the crossings. And so it's hard to equate that that's what we can get for everything, because I don't think the state DOT is going to step in and help us on too much more. Now, one other thing I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about. For parks, a developer will put in the streets. They'll put in curb gutter, they'll put in sewer line, water line, all of that. It doesn't happen for parks. We have to put the parks in. If a developer puts it in, and it's part of our plan, we have to reimburse them at market cost. So that means we're collecting $65,000 an acre, and I'll pick on Montrose. If we reimburse them, it's $235. So the community's already at a net negative. That's part of one of the codes that has changed over the years. The only way I can get land that I don't have to reimburse for is if I can get the developer to agree that they're not going to do that, or we get an annexation. Those are the only two tools that I have. So I think that was the last slide for me, correct?
Okay.
Well, I don't want to have to back up. Yes.
Okay.
So, other questions?
Any questions for
I
Mr.
just want to
Fair?
understand this right. So if you are requiring or asking a developer to have land in his development for a park, we have to pay for that then, or you have to? I mean, it's not part of the development agreement that, hey, this is, if you're going to get an
Yeah,
okay
it-
on this, you're
it
going to
can
give us
be.
this land.
Sometimes they get extra density for that. A lot of the stuff we're working on, I mean, Foxtail was in there. Tullamore is how we got a lot of it, because that was in the master agreement, but things have changed. So now, we have to work with them up front, and not every developer gets that, but they have that opportunity. So if there's land out there that's fitting within that, they do have a right to ask for reimbursement. I know that's
Really?
happening with Foxtail as far as development, so we're gonna take that over. That's just
So what changed?
state laws. They're how the legislature made amendments to impact fees. We also only collect on houses. We don't get to collect on industrial or commercial. So each one's a little bit different.
It's my understanding that cities aren't allowed to double dip necessarily. They can't have impact fees for parks and require a developer to give up park land and build it. So they have to, if a developer builds a park and donates it to the city, they're mitigating their impact.
Right. And sometimes that's a good thing. It's just, and there are times the developer can put it in cheaper than we can. They don't have to have a public works license per se, depending on when it's developed. Now, if they've already given the land to the city, then yes, they do, but there's other things there, so it's that equity. Also, we're seeing a lot of the developments aren't that large. You can't ask for a 5-acre park, which is kind of our minimum, from a 40-acre development. I know that. I mean, I understand that. So we're ending up buying stuff. We're looking at how can we add on to an existing park. But I can tell you, looking at this stuff, there's not a lot of open land left. And a few things that we did see, because we've looked for a dog park, trust me, I spent a lot of time looking for land for a dog park that would fit the requirements. I can't move that fast. We are a little bit slower process.
Any other questions?
No.
All right, Mr. Fair, thank you very much.
Okay.
There we go. Start fresh. Chairman, Commissioners, Bill Melvin, City Engineer. Was before you last time when we made the presentation to you, the first time we were before you. So some of this will be a little bit of a repeat. The concerns that we had heard last time were some of the unit costs proposals that we had, and also the right-of-way costs that were projected for some of the transportation multimodal portion of it. We had contracted with JUB to go through and update the existing capital improvement program costs for both transportation and multimodal as a result to do this project. Primarily, as we were seeing, the E&R index was not keeping up current with the cost of the capital improvement project. So JUB went and they looked back at the historical data that ITD had collected for 10 years with their projects. They'd looked at recent market volatility with costs. They looked at some unit price analysis trends, how much per lineal foot of curb and how much per lineal foot of sidewalk, some of those things. Watched the trending that was happening with that. They also looked at some bid adjustment factors. Are they federal projects that sometimes cost more because we have environmental and some more hoops to jump through to fund a federal project, or are they a local project that we can fund strictly out of impact fees without having to go and get grants and seek other funding sources? They also looked at the project size. Sometimes for a larger project, we can attract better bid prices with that. With the right-of-way costs that they had there, I know there was a concern in there. We went back and looked at it, had JB look at it. And for the transportation and multimodal, when you actually got into the unit price portion of it, they were in the $481 to $687 per square foot cost. That is lower than what you might see for a large expansion of the police facility or a park, because they're buying a huge piece of property. Here we're buying a smaller portion of a property to expand right-of-way or to get a corner of a property to put in a roundabout or a traffic signal or something like that. So we're not picking up as much property. So those were the unit costs that they actually had within their cost estimate. The transportation master plan under the transportation fees, they're based on the transportation master plan. We developed a capital improvement program to maintain the city's level of service requirements for moving traffic. They're based on, it's a 20-year growth cost. There's a 5, 10, and a 20-year capital plan for the transportation portion of it. You can see there the 20-year growth costs a little bit over $76 million over the next 20 years. And those are applied on a per trip basis. Most, for a residential unit, apartment unit, there's a set how many trips per resident. Same thing with commercial based on the size and that. So they're all applied strictly on a per trip basis. The multimodal portion of it is based on the establishment of how much the level of service was established based on what was the existing miles or linear foot of trail that we had within the city per population. And so as the city grew, it was a replacement-based methodology was the criteria that it was set. So they established the current cost, what it would cost to replace an equivalent amount of that. From that, they took those dollars, went back and established a capital improvement program. We have this many dollars, here's the needs, here's where these dollars would go and apply to. So that's how the multimodal was established. They are applied on a per-person basis for residential and a per-trip basis for commercial and industrial. And that was the previous one that John had recently shown. So do you have any questions on the transportation or multimodal portion this evening?
I do.
Yes.
On the multimodal, it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the current level of service is based on the current number of lane miles of bike lane trails or bike trails, multimodal pathways, et cetera. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So when a project builds a road, let's say a collector or an arterial, to a standard that has bike lanes and multimodal pathways as part of that, why isn't that, just like the park stuff, being subtracted back out?
Because it's not listed specifically within the capital improvement plan. So there was a replacement base, so every linear foot of a trail that somebody puts in addition to it's their requirements as a part of the development. So, if they put in a trail adjacent to a roadway as opposed to a sidewalk adjacent to a roadway, that's our requirement to complete those improvements. We were looking at areas where expansion of trail systems predominantly where, like the expansion of the Centennial Trail, modifications of the trail, assisting with the Prairie Trail system that had been established, and also some areas within the capital improvement plan, McGuire Road and some other areas that we need a much more serious trail system than a developer coming in and building to current standards. So if a developer did build those facilities and that area was listed on the specific capital improvement plan, then there would be a reimbursement. But if it's not listed within the capital improvement plan, then there's not a reimbursement for those items.
Well, how can we use bike lanes and pathways, multimodal pathways adjacent to existing streets, so the existing stuff, as the basis for our level of service, but not apply it in the future?
It is applied that's how it was applied to establish a replacement-based methodology. So Tischler came up, they went through and said, this is what you have.
Right.
For population, as the population grows, we're going to replace that. And then from there, they looked at the capital improvement, the transportation plan had a multimodal portion of it. They took those dollars and applied those to certain projects listed specifically within that capital plan.
But
So
doesn't,
if it's within the capital improvement plan, then somebody develops that and builds those specific projects, then they're reimbursed.
but aren't the lane miles that a developer would build on a project also go into the future calculation for replacement-based level of service? So let's just say that 2018, we had 20 lane miles of multimodal pathway and bike lanes, and developers built another 5 miles between then and now, and we go through and 2 years from now, we redo the calculation. Aren't we going to be using 25 miles as our base?
You will have some that where you had like a multi-use trail that was adjacent to where somebody built a pathway as opposed to a sidewalk. Those were not necessarily included within there. So
But
right.
bike lanes. I'm talking about bike lanes and things like that were
Right.
part of it. Those would be included, right, in a future level of service calculation?
If we update the plan,
Right.
we would have them look at that and see if they include that. That's something that our future consultant would guide us in. whether we would use all of those or not.
Okay. It seems like there's a lot of developments. I mean, I know the little ones don't, but a lot of the larger ones put in a lot of bike trails and multimodal pathways and bike lanes and things like that, and they're not getting credit for it. And there's the multimodal cost is, I mean, it just seems like it's a little bit of a double dip.
Yeah, like I say, it is very specific to the projects that are listed within the CIP for multimodal, or the projects that the dollars are going towards.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And then with regards to the regular transportation master plan stuff, I was going through the list on the short-term projects and comparing them to the 2018 CIP dollars versus today's. And the intersection of Henry and Mullen went from 688,000 to 3.6 million. Can you explain why that would be the case?
I'd have to look at that specific project. There's a
Because
multitude of projects on there, and I couldn't speak to that one specific. There was probably more, maybe some more right-of-way acquisition or something that was done there, but I couldn't speak to that one specific project today.
I mean-
I could research that.
I mean, Idaho and 12th Street went from 22,000 to 213. I mean, they're huge jumps, and you can't explain it necessarily with inflation. At least,
They dug in a lot deeper in looking at the projects in regards to the size of the project, how much right-of-way, than was done within the original transportation CIP. So it was a totally different consultant. JUB did not do our transportation CIP. We asked JUB to dig in deeper to look, okay, how many lanes is there right-of-way specifically at that intersection, as opposed to maybe using more generic costs for something like that.
So the project itself could have maybe gotten a little bit bigger, or more expansive.
There could
or
have been
something.
something that maybe originally,
Then-
so when they sat down and actually looked, they kept the same capital improvement projects, but they looked a little more critical at each project.
Okay.
I
And
mean, it
that-
seems
that
a lot
maybe
like
could have changed it.
scope creep instead of just inflationary costs.
We didn't add any projects.
Not talking
to it.
projects, I'm just talking about
Scope of the project.
the scope of the project got it
Okay.
ballooned.
Yeah, that's what I think
That-
it
Yeah.
was kind of.
That was not done. All the projects remained as were specifically on the list.
Okay.
We didn't expand the projects.
So there were some gross errors then in the previous one?
I would have to go back and look at those specific elements, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost what you're beginning to see, right?
Well, it's either
Yeah.
wrong now or
I-
wrong then.
Right, I would have to look at the specific projects that you have, correct?
Yeah.
And did JUB look at right-of-way acquisition that comes with development for most of those projects? Like the big roundabouts, there's a lot of right-of-way that goes with them, but
If there's right-of-way that's we're getting from the developers, it's included within the CIP costs, that is a reimbursable.
okay.
Other questions?
No.
Mr. Melvin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Fair, you have
Yes.
correction?
I'd like to apologize. I would like to correct a number I said earlier. When I talked about the land, I think I said 174,000 was what we were looking at level one. And I did go back and check and look at the really small print. That number, it was actually 147,000 for level one and 87,000 for level two. So I apologize. I usually know those numbers, but call me
Transpose.
dyslexic.
You wouldn't be the first person to do that, Dave.
No. Thank you, sir.
That pretty much wraps up
Mhm.
each division, it's just whether or not you have any lasting questions.
Commissioners, anything additional?
No. do have one question. Has the thought ever rolled around that if things continue as they are right now, maybe in a year you can buy some of this land a little cheaper than you can buy it right now? I mean,
I wasn't in those discussions. I can look at potentially Dave.
So yes, we've had those discussions. We've watched it go up. As I said, we're looking at an agreement right now at over 200,000 an acre. The chief's $12 an acre isn't that bad. I can tell you I've had higher ones that we've looked at that we just can't afford. At a certain point, just say we can't afford it.
right,
Something else we discounted is because there's not a lot of land left, raw land. It's 5-acre parcels with houses on it. Those costs are even more. So I don't think we're gonna see the prices drop down that much. I mean, we're already discounting at it when you look at that part of it.
and I'm sure you have. I just wanted to
I-
check and
I
see
can
if that
tell
was
you-
something that was kind of rolling around
Yeah.
a little bit. I mean, these are really big numbers.
I feel like a day trader when I look at some of this stuff.
Right.
I'm watching numbers and
Yeah.
I'm checking. I'll see a sign, I'll call.
Yeah,
I've also
okay.
done some of my own real estate on our own, our farmland. So I feel pretty tied into it.
Okay,
I'm seeing just less and less that's available. And for us just to buy land to check off a box, that doesn't do our citizens any good. You gotta, it's kinda like, the right tree in the right place. Well, we wanna have the land so that it's walkable, so that we maintain that quality of our community.
right, right. Yeah, understood. I guess I was just trying to.
Yeah.
For the record, I mean,
Yeah.
are we
No,
trying to
we
be
are trying.
good
We're looking at-
stewards of our?
Oh,
Right.
and we are.
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
was just, and I'm sure you are.
And you look at the level two, it's a lot less. I can tell you that a lot of the stuff that we're seeing, that would be that stuff out there that actually has trees on it, maybe a little bit of a slope, it has trees. They want a lot more than that, but I do look at that as being a little more difficult to develop, that we're gonna see those numbers drop. So we felt okay with that.
Okay.
And if anybody knows a property, that's going for a good price,
We'll talk, Dave.
yeah, we'll talk.
I was gonna say, I think what Mr. Fair is trying to say is he's being very diligent with
Yes.
the taxpayers' money.
Yep.
But he also doesn't have the magic ball because
Yep.
in 6 months, could we see 20% increase possibly, or 20% decrease? We don't know.
Right.
So,
And I can tell you, a former mayor called me cheap, and he was right. I don't care if it's the city's money, the taxpayers' money or mine. I'm kind of an old farmer. I hate to use that term old, but I want the value for there because the stuff, whatever we spend on that means that much harder to develop and get what the public needs, so.
Right.
But we do look heavily.
Okay, thank you.
Dave, you're not an old farmer, you're a seasoned farmer.
Vintage.
Cheap
Chief.
isn't necessarily
To
bad
answer your
either.
question for our specific land that we're looking at purchasing right now, 5 years ago, that land sold for about $5 to $6 a square foot. Now we're looking at $12 to $13 a square foot. It's very sought after because they're commercial lots, and in our specific area, those lots are being bought up left and right
Yeah.
by, Northwest Specialty,
Yeah.
Kootenai, other car lots.
It's hot property right now.
So I don't see ours
Yeah.
going down at all. I see ours shooting up.
I
more.
would agree with
No,
that
you're
in
ab-
that specific case. I would,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Other thoughts, comments? I mean, Ray, I think I'm tracking with you in the sense of, I'm looking here going, okay, I don't want to say, was it blown last time? But,
I mean, I specifically looked at a lot of the transportation stuff and the deep dive that I dove into it. And 3.6 million for a 2-lane roundabout is astronomical. It should be half that at the most. And if it's 3.6 million, we should probably be looking at other options like a traffic signal for $1 million. I know that's not in our master plan. I know that's not what we're here to do and look at tonight. I definitely don't feel comfortable with the increase being what it is, I think with all due respect to JEB, I think their prices are inflated. And they do that for good reason. They're very, very conservative. And I think we have to be careful about finding that balance between making development pay for development and making sure that development doesn't overpay. And the reality is that these dollars just get passed on to the person buying a house or renting an apartment, and that's which means that our residents and our future residents and our children and people who are growing up here are going to pay the price for that. And it comes out of the developer's pocket, and it seems like oh, that's easy. It comes out of the developer's pocket, but really it just gets passed on. And so that's and that turns around and makes it hard for, it makes it hard for the police chief to find police officers who can live here, because they can't afford to. And so we have to really play that balance. I would feel comfortable recommending an increase, but not one as steep as it is. And I don't know if it's germane tonight to actually say what that number should be. I don't think it's necessarily something that, I'd feel comfortable with half, but that's just a number. There's no real anything behind that, other than just all the numbers that I see. Like, I get the park stuff. I understand that the real estate specific to the police department is right next door. And for them to do a satellite office somewhere else is not even close to ideal for their operational costs. So I get that they're fixed and they're stuck. So police thing, I get it. Parks dollars based on real estate costs. Dave, I also get that. I understand where that's coming from. And I've got developers paying $900,000 for a 5-acre piece. Seems totally nuts. And then I've got other developers that are paying $35,000 an acre for large ag land, and there's everything in between. So I get that. I understand that those are where the costs are, and I think a lot of the expensive ones, like the little 5-acre jobbies in town, they come with a house, and those are both good and bad. It's fine for developers, but not necessarily great for parks, because you end up with something that's not ADA accessible. So those are tough. But I understand where you're coming from, because the land that's available and for sale, which is even the harder part, it gets snapped up pretty quickly, and you're in competition with people with deeper pockets. So I get that. I understand. I philosophically have a problem with the multimodal stuff, but that's not here nor there. So, but I don't think that the construction costs on the transportation and the multimodal have jumped that much. And it's a huge hit. And I can't support what we have. I could support something less than, but I don't feel like I can support the dollars for those two.
Vicky Joe?
I'm listening to what he's having to say. It is a big jump on that part. And I have to kind of agree. Maybe there's alternative ways for roads or different things that are a little bit less expensive than, like you said, the roundabouts, or some different way to go. I don't know. That's a big jump to hit. I don't want to see developers not come here because our impact fees are becoming so huge. But I know we need them, and
Well, I think
our homeowners are demanding, or our residents saying, hey, let these people pay for what they're bringing into us. So it's kind of we got to get a middle ground here.
Yeah, I think Chief's right. I mean, the quality and level of service that's provided here are going to bring people in. But as Ray said, the price is just going to get passed on to those individuals that
Yeah,
are coming
it
in.
does.
So, Nancy?
I think, yeah, it's a big jump, and I think my biggest concern with that is just that increase too. We're looking for housing that's more affordable, and it's hard to have more affordable housings like cottage houses that are smaller, and they're still gonna pay the extra, the additional 70%, that increase, if we increase it to that. So it really, I think it's kind of counterproductive to that, to affordable housing, where people own a home. So it's a concern, but I asked a lot of questions, and I don't know. I only know some questions to ask. The experts are out there. They brought it up. I don't know how to change those numbers. I don't know how to do that. So I don't know what else to do. I can't suggest a different number because I don't have enough information. I don't know enough to do that, so I don't know how to handle it. If we don't approve it, then it's not approved. And if we do, I can't throw another number out. That's just not something I can do.
Well,
It's not-
from-
nor is it appropriate.
From a
Yeah.
legal standpoint, again, we're making a recommendation,
Yeah.
correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So we are making a recommendation.
Okay.
I think, and I could be wrong, but as far as recommendations, it sounds like everybody understands that in order to expand the police station, we see the numbers, we get it. Parks and Rec, we get it. I think it sounds like, Ray, your biggest piece would be that construction infrastructure piece. Would you say that's the-
Yeah, it's a construction, and the right-of-way costs associated with a lot of the stuff on the CIP, because I think a lot of those are gonna come, a lot of the right-of-way costs is gonna come from development, from right-of-way acquisition that happens.
So Field, if
So-
there's a comfort level with some but not all,
So again, it's a recommendation to city council. I've got the recommendation pulled up. I can do it how it comes out, and how you want to structure it, and then.
I think that's the
we can-
question. Is it a recommendation as a whole? It needs to be, right? It has to be a recommendation as a whole instead of pieces and parts.
So the recommendation is for the, whether or not to adopt the changes to the improvement plan.
As a whole,
as a
yes.
whole
Okay,
For the, recommended by the technical memorandum.
okay.
Is staff 100%, I don't know what,
On board?
agreeing with the transportation costs in this? I mean, would you have any questions on this, the company's?
We hired JUB,
Uh-huh.
who's very well respected in the area.
Okay.
Reviewed their costs. We didn't go into every little specific line
Yeah.
item.
Right.
That's why we hired them to do it. We thought the costs and the unit costs and the dollars we're seeing in that, within there seemed reasonable.
Okay,
okay?
thank you.
For what we are seeing on our
With what you-
projects.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
So to clarify, I do have the recommendation pulled up. If we wanted to break it out into parts, I think we still could do that, recommending that the police and the parks and that sort of thing is adopted as provided in the
Presented.
technical memorandum, and break it down if we wanted to do that, and I can sort of make those changes on the fly.
What's the comfort level there?
I could do something like that.
I think that I would be comfortable with that. I mean, if we're kind of agreeing that we agree on quite a few of the things, we just want to maybe bring up the point to take a deeper dive into some of those costs for the multimodal, right? That's where we're kind of looking.
Right.
Is that-
Well, it wasn't just that you're talking about.
Multimodal and
He's talking-
transportation.
Right.
yeah.
For the cost, that we're talking about the land cost as well, I mean, which I thought are of course crazy, but I asked the questions that I really wanted the answers for, and I think that I got them, and so,
Well, the nice thing is that if Ray puts forth a motion, we can either agree with him or not. So if you want to take a stab at it, I would say have at it, Ray.
okay, you go for it, Ray.
I will. Let's see here. I would move to recommend approval of the public safety and parks impact fee increases. And I would further move to recommend approval of the multimodal and transportation impact fee increases at a rate lesser, or at a lower level, at a lower amount than what was presented in the impact fee report. And ask that that staff evaluate the the very large increases as, well, I don't know how to exactly state this. I think I'll just leave it as at a lesser amount,
That's our amount,
and I think I've spoken enough about that
yeah.
they
Yeah.
can parse that out.
Do you feel that the necessary components are in the motion?
Yeah, I can
Okay.
work with that.
Been a motion then?
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second, further discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote.
Carrie,
Yes,
Kimball,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Hampi,
Yes.
Administrative and staff reports.
None.
Commissioner comments, anything for the good of the order? Hearing none, I'd looking for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.